Good therapy is good for everyone. Bad therapy is not good for anyone.
Welcome everybody to our first episode, debut episode of Mental Health Uncensored. I'm Shlomi Balsam.
And I am Yehuda Rothstein.
And we're going to try to shed some light on the mental health issues in the Jewish community with the guidance of our Rebbe, Rabbi Yitzchak Berkowitz.
Again, this is not something we would necessarily be comfortable doing if not for our Rebbe, Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz, allowing us to use his thoughts as a platform to discuss different topics. And I'm really excited to do that because he's someone that is just amazing. Let's get it on.
Yeah, we're going to break down each episode into 3 parts. At first, we're going to present the topic, the question, and only one of us had actually sat down and asked Rebbe the question. So the other guy is going to take a jab at it and see what he would answer. Then in part 2, we'll ask Rebbe the question, see how Rebbe looks at it, see what Das Torah thinks. And in the third and final part, we'll unpack what Rebbe said, break it down, and discuss that. This week, I sat down with Rabbi Berkowitz, and first, I asked him about getting the podcast on the ground, get it rolling, get the train out of the station, and I picked up on he's also excited about it, which is amazing.
Really?
Yeah. There was like a certain he leaned forward in his seat and he's like, "All right, let's do this."
Really?
Yeah. I know. I walked out of that meeting dancing and singing. I just hugged everybody. It was amazing. And I wasn't planning on asking a question. 3 minutes is enough time for a question and an answer, and it takes a lifetime to unpack those 3 minutes. We'll try to do it in an episode. But a question did come up because I asked him whether everyone needs therapy, and we'll get to that in another episode. And he said, well, I guess we'll see what he said. He brought up the idea of red flags in therapy. Not every therapist is a good therapist.
Right, and I think it's important that people, when going to a therapist, are comfortable knowing that they have the correct guidance to know what to look for and, to feel safe. Because walking into a therapist knowing what's a red flag causes you to, have the ability to feel comfortable a million times faster. I'm sure you've had that in your own practice where people come in and they immediately trust you. I'm sure that is extremely helpful.
It's overwhelming. Especially when you're first starting out and there's a guy sitting here who's just pouring his life out to you. It's heavy. It's heavy. I am a little nervous, opening up with this discussion because it is quite negative. And
I feel the same way. So I think we, even though this is sort of a negative, what's the red flags of a therapist?
Yeah.
In the same way, it's a negative conversation, but it's a way for people to positively go to a therapist and be able to know what to look for.
Yeah.
And again, we would not feel comfortable saying these ideas on our own. This is because we have someone who has a tenure in dealing with problems.
Yeah, that's right. Rav Berkowitz has said many times, with exactly in this lashon, that there are bad therapists. And that made me rethink my perspective. I always thought that there are...
you are a therapist also.
That's right. Yeah. So, but you know what? That gives me bias in both directions. I want to think that I'm a good therapist. There's also this... There is a backstreet talk, of, oh, he's awful, he's terrible, come to me instead. Downplaying every other model that's not mine.
Interesting.
Yeah, he's the bad therapist, and I'm with the good ones. But then... I think even when it comes to bad therapists, they're not necessarily bad as a whole. If I may, and we'll see if this works with Rebbe's answer. And Yehuda, actually, just for you guys to know, Yehuda hasn't heard this recording yet. He's been saving it for you guys, and so I only know what Rebbe said. But I think we could say that every therapist can be good in the right thing. I think there are some therapists that should be bricklayers instead. But if you're going to pick up on any of these red flags, from your therapist, he's not a therapist for you. He's a bad therapist for you. I wouldn't, cross his name off a list. I just wouldn't send you, or maybe your issue, right? If you're struggling with anxiety and he's making you more anxious, then maybe don't go to him for anxiety.
So let's first discuss the detriment of having a bad therapist. And it sounds like a silly thing because you might say obviously, but I feel like if we discuss the detriment, again, I didn't hear the recording of Rebbe of what he said the red flags were. So I, made my own list of red flags.
All right, okay.
The first one, so then, if God willing, we're going to hear what Rebbe says and see the differences. Yeah, cross-reference and see exactly,
Yeah, I think while people realize that a bad therapist is bad, I'm not sure if people really realize just how bad it could be.
I would say the obvious silly one is the fact that you're not going to get help. And I feel like that's a little bit overlooked. You're going to therapy to come out a healthier person.
Yeah.
And if you're not coming out a healthier person, not only are you wasting, your time, obviously your money, you're wasting a lot of mental energy. Therapy isn't easy. You want to be able to, you want your first try to be at least as educated as good as you can.
Do you think it's a red flag if therapy is easy? If you're going in there and you're not working at all, and it's like, it's great. I go in there, he makes me feel wonderful about myself.
I would say it depends on what you need. Mm-hmm. It's obviously hard. I mean, if someone's struggling with self-confidence or the fact that they feel like no one loves them, and this is the first feeling of that, maybe it is amazing. He walks in, he just feels like he's floating, and that's his chiyus for the week, for the month, whatever.
And he could be introduced to feeling good.
Yeah. And then the second number 2 big one, I would say, is that you may think you're getting helped. This is what I was, as I was just trying to think about it. You may think you're getting help, but being plugged in, you're going to therapy. Realistically speaking, it's because you don't know the method to cure whatever you are coming in to cure. You're going to therapy, hoping that the person across the table from you will provide you with some sort of guidance in this issue. So the mere fact that you don't know puts you at a major disadvantage because he's giving you pieces of information. If that information is skewed, you are going to follow that. I mean, that's why you're there. Mm-hmm. So if you have a therapist that is unfortunately giving you bad advice, you're going to be going down the wrong way, possibly creating other issues, and for sure making the one that you have worse because you're not working on it.
Right. Just by letting it continue, it'll get worse itself.
Exactly.
Right.
Anything that's getting helped, which I feel like could cause problems in and of itself.
You think besides for it just percolating, if there could be skills or advice that a therapist gives a client that can make his issues worse?
Have you ever had that, Shlomi, where you gave someone advice and after you're like, God, that's bad?
That made it worse. No, I've never given a client advice.
Interesting. Okay, so I guess we're gonna get back to that. Okay, so that's a loaded answer right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I guess we're gonna get back to that.
It's a rule of thumb. I have like a few rules of thumb. If I tell you what to do, then that's totally on me.
Interesting. Okay, that was actually, I'm gonna jump right into that. That was one of my red flags.
Okay.
One of my red flags that I came up with was, well, first of all, on the first note that you're not getting helped, check in with yourself. And I don't know what that time frame is. Check in with yourself. Am I getting help? Am I getting healthier? Red flag number 1, I'm not getting healthier. It's been X amount of time. I don't know what that time is. Let's say a year, and I am not getting healthier.
Right.
I've heard sentences from people that are going for like this simple anxiety stuff. So I've been in therapy for years. And it's an ongoing issue. Did you get any help? Well, we're working on it. Okay, so again, I don't know the person's real issue. Right. I'm just saying I think that's a red flag and something that you should sit back and just reflect.
Yeah.
It's been 2 years of therapy. I mean, I would hope you get somewhere. That's my red flag number 2.
There's got to at least be checkpoints along the way where, like, first we worked on that, and I discovered my emotions, and then I took them one by one.
That was my number 3.
Yeah, what's that?
My number 3 was that, do you see where the guy is taking you? Meaning, do you see a plan? Do you see a plan with this therapist? Meaning, not just like come in today, talk about this, and walk out. Is there a goal? Do you see the therapist says, we're going to work on this, and eventually we will get you to here? Or is it just, I would say that's a red flag. If you're just going in and you're just talking about stuff and you don't, in your head, see a map of, God willing, we're going to overcome this. It might take unpacking 1,000 other detours.
Yeah.
Red flag number 2. And my red flag number 3 that I came up with was, do you feel like you're speaking for yourself, or is the therapist putting ideas into your head you did not have before? Which again, isn't necessarily bad, because it could be he's telling you stuff that is true, but is it a feeling, meaning stuff that you just didn't discover about yourself yet, that he's able to pick up on from your cadence or how you're acting or what you're saying?
Yeah.
But if he's saying stuff that you didn't want to say, I had a friend tell me today that he had a therapist once who was making him hate his parents. Hate them. He didn't hate them going into therapy. Now, maybe he should hate them. Maybe they're abusing him and he doesn't realize that. It could be.
Let's have an episode on that. I asked Rebbe what to do with parents.
Okay.
That's a quick discussion.
But it could be. But is the therapist putting ideas into your head? So again, the 3 that I was saying is check in on yourself. Are you feeling like you're being helped? And kind of in the same note, do you see a goal? Do you see a path? That's number 2.
Yeah.
Do you see a path where the guy is leading you down? And or are you just going in and just feeling good walking down like, I don't really know what happened there, what's the point? I have this and this issue. How I feel like a goal, and red flag number 3 is he putting stuff into your head and mind that wasn't an issue before? That's what I think. What do you think about that, Shlomo?
Every one of those are absolute gold. There was a psychoanalytical therapist, psychiatrist, psychologist. One of these like old-time Freudian style, lie down on a couch and I'll tell you everything that you didn't even realize you were thinking. Yeah?
Okay.
The whole time, with that therapy, often, I mean, you're the guy is introducing you to subconscious ideas. I don't know what's happening in my subconscious. It could make no sense to me, but if my psychoanalyst tells me that I actually really want to, kill my brother, like I love my brother. I want to kill my brother? Oh no. Oh man, okay.
Right.
So that runs into your third problem. That's red flag number 3. True story, this guy went to one of these hotshot therapists for 17 years.
Jew?
No. Neither side. And I mean, every single time he would come and tell him what he's thinking, and they would, decrypt it, so to speak. And the guy got nowhere. And it took him 15, 16, 17 years until he actually did step number 1, your first red flag, and checked in on himself. And he said, 1 second. I started going to therapy because I had crazy anxiety. It was consuming me. 17 years later, it's only gotten worse.
Yeah.
So he decided,
so sad.
He built up the courage. His next session, he came in and he told his psychologist, I've been thinking about it. I don't really feel like we've gotten anywhere. Like, I'm still really anxious. The psychologist got indignant, yelled at him, you don't know how this works, and never saw him again.
Okay, that's intense.
It's an extreme example of it. I believe that this does happen subtly. Relatively common.
And I think it can't even be referred to as a therapist. I'm scared to say this, but we know that shochad yaver einei chachamim, bribery turns the eyes of the wise. Meaning, even if it's Moshe Rabbeinu, if you give him $5, he can't judge your case. You are paying the therapist to come back if you're not healed.
Yeah.
He is getting money if you are not healed. If you are healed, he is not getting any more money.
Yeah.
Now, I hate to say that because, it's kind of intense, but, we hope that they at least minimize that bribery and they're able to, hopefully, if they're a therapist, get healthy in some way that they can notice if they're doing that on their own.
Yeah.
But you can notice if they're doing it. Like, these are ways for you to notice that. Like, how can the therapist is not a bad guy. Right. He could be blinded by the money.
Yeah. That's why I'm a little scared to call them bad therapists. They're not bad people. Definitely not. Like I said, great bricklayers. But they might even be good for someone else if they're only doing step number 1. Meaning, if you only have the first red flag, that you're just not getting the help that you want, then maybe he's just talking a different language than you. Not that if he's planting ideas, making you hate your parents.
Large.
I love mom and pop. So there maybe we should push them into the bricklayer industry. But yeah, I'm scared to call it bad. Although Rebbe, you'll hear, he often says there are bad therapists. He's not a therapist.
Again, it's not a surprise.
He's a lot more than that.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and he picks up the pieces.
Yeah, which is why I feel like he's the best person to talk to about it, because the people that therapists aren't working for them, who do they go to next? Mm-hmm. Who are they going to? The next person on the list, maybe it should have been the first, maybe it's a good argument, is the rabbi. They went to the therapist. It's not helping. They go to another therapist. Not helping.
Right.
Where do they go next?
Yeah. Rebbe, I'm going to therapy. It's not working.
Exactly. Yeah, and the clarity
if they have a Rebbe. What does a guy do if he doesn't have a Rebbe who's close enough to tell him that therapy's failing me? I don't think people even realize that their therapy is failing them. That's the thing. Rav Yitzchak put out a book, right? I'm confused. Am I abused? People don't know. That's why I think this is such an important topic. Like you started out with, the people who are being failed by the system, by the therapist, or being taken advantage of in the worst case scenario by the therapist, they don't know.
It's true. And to be honest, as I said before, they're going in blind, and that's natural, because the reason they're going there is because they don't know the answer.
Right.
They're going in blind. That's how, unless the person has an idea and they can right away tell this person is not going down the right track.
Mm-hmm. There's a tremendous vulnerability when you go to therapy, and you go in there, and it is helpful if you've seen more than one therapist. You can compare them. Go on YouTube, go online. There are Nefesh, all these programs. They do post. You can see live therapeutic situations. You'd be like, wow, my thing looks nothing like that. I'm sure they're not posting the ones where it didn't go well, but you could get a sense of what therapy is supposed to look like. And at base camp, you should feel like I'm being helped.
Exactly. And again, these red flags don't necessarily, as we said before, mean that your therapist is bad or even not for you. It could also mean that there's some aspect of self-awareness that you need to work on. All these things that we mentioned could be a you thing. It could be you don't see the map of where he's going because you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
It could be you feel like he's putting thoughts in your head because you only verbalize stuff halfway and he has to finish his sentences.
Speak up.
Exactly. And it's okay even if it's a you thing.
What do you mean a you thing?
If those three reasons are coming from you and you really should be doing, that's okay.
Sure, then
but that's something
that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You should be able to talk to, and if you can bring these things up to him, it could be all the red flags go away. If you can bring these things up and he can explain to you everything, and you don't see that something else is going on over here.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I would love to hear what Ravi said. So let's play the recording.
Good therapy is good for everyone. Bad therapy is not good for anyone.
Nice. Okay.
I am dealing, unfortunately, with so many cases of bad therapists.
Really?
Yeah. Seems like people who have real problems gravitate towards the worst therapists, and then their spouses just can't get them out of it.
What are the red flags for someone to realize that he's in one of those?
So listen, if you're either not going anywhere or you're being taught to be upset about a situation you're not really upset about, or someone's making up things that just don't, someone's telling you things that just don't, like, they don't make sense to you. Generally speaking, when a therapist points something out to you, if it's, if the guy's good, you realize he's right.
Yeah.
It's unless there's something really wrong with you where you're in denial. But b'derech klal, anyone that really wants help themselves, the therapist points something out, so you know he's right. You feel it, yeah, I know.
Right.
And when they start telling you things, and the other one is and this is the one that I found has become very common. Therapists who see it as their role just to be supportive.
As opposed to?
You are obviously dealing with a borderline. this person explodes every time things happen. And they're coming to you to vent. And you're supporting them.
So then now the therapist is an enabler.
Yeah.
He should be the one pushing back and
telling them, yeah, I see how strongly you feel about it, but you gotta take control of your reactions. Just because you're angry, that doesn't mean you're putter, you know?
Right. Okay, you were spot on.
I feel like, wow, that was actually very humbling.
Yeah.
Wow. I feel like there's two differences. Obviously, the last point about being supportive. We'll get to that in a second. But the first point I saw that was different is I was talking about looking back at the therapy to see if the thing is that if you feel like he's putting ideas in your head, and he was talking about actively during the therapy to be able to say, does that resonate with me?
Yeah.
Which I feel like is much more hands-on. But yeah, wow, very, very crazy. And then the last point was, I didn't even touch on that, about being supportive, which feels really good, but can literally be detrimental in certain cases, obviously.
Right. The supportive, the supporting has to be a container for the work, meaning you have to feel safe, you have to feel understood.
Well
you
said.
can't help me
Well
if you don't
said.
get me. So yeah, first I get you, 100%. That being said, this is amazing. Everybody's like, yeah, but you're not putter just because this is hard for you. You can't punch someone in the face because you're angry. Yeah, it's great that you're angry. I get that. Anger is overwhelming, and you can feel like you totally have no control, but you have to be in control.
It's kind of like removing the guilt. Removing the guilt can be very beneficial if the only thing that's wrong with the guy is this intense guilt. If the only thing that's possibly preventing him from doing worse stuff is more guilt, so taking away the guilt will just enable him, as you said, in the conversation with Rebbe. Removing the guilt will just he's a free bird now.
Right.
Now I'm understood.
Yeah.
I have an excuse for being in this case, it seems like a out of control angry person.
Rebbe used the example of borderline, right? So there's BPDs, borderline personality disorder.
Well, when did you use that example? In which part?
He said this when it comes to supporting. He's like, this guy's obviously borderline. And borderline personality disorder comes in two forms. There's part A, type B. I had a client with type B. And even type B, which is the less vibrant of the two, the sways of emotion from mania to depression aren't as contrasted, but it's still it's a tremendous weight, not only on the people around your client, but the person themselves. You know, their body is just taking them for a ride. The borderline personality disorder it's part of the cluster B disorders. Those are the personality disorders. The intense medication is appropriate and necessary to live a healthy, well-balanced, to be able to have healthy relationships in your life, right? It's hypersensitivity to rejection, which leads to instability in interpersonal relationships, self-image, affect, and behavior. It's a really tough place to be. And sympathy is important. You have to be able to, and every therapist has to be on the same page as their client, or the client isn't going to be willing to go for a ride with them. They're not going to be willing to change where they're at unless they feel understood, unless I feel like my therapist is standing with me at the gates of Gehenna, and then together we could take a baby step forward. So you need that empathy, you need that sympathy, a feeling, not just understanding, but actually like knowing that my therapist understands me and gets me and he's in it with me. And then we can take that sympathy a step further. Pure sympathy, pure endless sympathy is not helpful. It feels good, but it doesn't take you anywhere. Sympathy is a tool to encase the next step. Right now you're suffering because you are exploding every time you're rejected, right? You take rejection horribly, right? And it's not necessarily your fault, right? That's the way your emotional body is designed. That's how your neurons are firing. You have BPD, what are you gonna do? But just because you feel like exploding doesn't mean that you can. And yet you have to take some element of control here. And that's, and there are, obviously you can't suggest something or push your client into some place where he can't go, but using the sympathy and the empathy that you used and you built that therapeutic alliance, now you're on the same page. Now your client will be open and willing to take the next step with you in that, ship, in that raft of empathy that you built together, and now he feels safe. That's the key. Now he feels safe to move into uncharted territory, to go somewhere uncomfortable and unfamiliar because he trusts you. You get him.
It's a very interesting topic, but I feel like this is more of a red flag for someone that is talking to someone else in therapy as opposed to someone themselves, because it seems like this person who's getting the sympathy is not necessarily in the state to be able to on their own see that this therapy is bad for them. I wonder, do you agree with that?
For someone who's actually borderline and his therapist is enabling him, that red flag is probably going to be picked up by the people in his life who realize that he's not going anywhere. He's not trying.
Interesting. Can we shift? Mm-hmm. Can we shift to the first point?
Yeah.
That Rabbi said.
You're going nowhere.
Right, and I feel like I definitely touched on that one, but
you nailed it. You're good at this.
That was exciting. But going nowhere is a big thing, because in therapy, I feel like, as we touched on a bunch of times, because you feel like the magic is in the hands of the therapist, you kind of trust them. Like, okay, like I'm willing to not go, like, whatever you say, man.
You have to. It doesn't work if you don't trust your therapist.
Right, but at the same time, you have to be looking. It's kind of like this, right? So you're sitting in the passenger seat of a car, and your friend's driving, and you trust them fully. So you're not gonna.
You keep your eye on the handbrake.
Exactly. That's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Are you keeping your eyes on this guy's GPS? On the therapist, where's he taking you? Meaning, you trust him fully about his driving skills.
Or you call it an Uber. Yeah. If he starts driving without asking you where you want to go.
Wasn't it in the Uber app already?
Let's say, old time taxis, whatever. You get in a taxi and the guy just starts driving. You're like, well, hold on. Wait, maybe ask me where I want to end up at the end of this trip.
Right.
And is there an end to this trip?
Right. I guess. Where are we going?
Yeah.
I guess in a way that would kill the safety of the whole situation.
What do you mean?
I mean, when you see that you're being driven without the goal, and the goal being your ultimate health.
If your therapist doesn't have a goal for you, you shouldn't feel safe.
Right, but
this guy's driving you in circles.
I think people fall into the trap because they assume that he's the driver, he's the GPS, he's the everything. He's the eyes on the road, he's where we're going, he knows everything. Which is fair, but keep your eye open to make sure that he's got a destination in mind.
And if you want to go somewhere else.
Do you discuss this with your clients?
Absolutely.
About where we're going to go?
Almost every session.
Want to play that out for us?
Every 3-4 sessions. Meaning, we'll set a goal, and ideally I would love to have 2-hour sessions where we can knock out this entire problem in one session. You'll come back next time, we'll reinforce it, and start the next thing. Practically, we only get 40-50 minutes, but we break it up piecemeal. Like, this is the goal. You want to eliminate anxiety? Okay, we're going to identify your anxiety. We're going to accept and appreciate what your anxiety does for you, lower those resistance, and then we're going to give you coping mechanisms to help you throughout. We're going to, figure out the source of it, and it'll be 4 or 5 sessions, and God willing, it'll be gone in a month and a half, or it'll be very, mitigated by then. So you should be able to chart it, and I take down numbers also. How are you feeling? What are your anxiety levels now? 0 to 100. 90. Okay, let's do this exercise. How does it feel now? 15 minutes later, it's at 20. How did that work? Right? Yeah, and it's important. If you're not keeping track, forget about your client. The therapist doesn't know if what he's doing is working.
Right.
What if it doesn't work?
I think that's a big one also. I think we didn't touch on that yet. We're constantly talking about the people in therapy. But a good therapist should be checking in. Like, are you happy with this destination? Have we achieved anything? And to ask that. Very interesting. Very interesting.
Are we getting somewhere? Bottom line, here are the 3 red flags. Number 1, you're not going anywhere. Number 2, you're getting problems that you didn't come in with. And number 3, you're being overly validated and your therapist has become your
enabler.
That's right. I find that Rebbe doesn't drop big chidushim. Not often. Sometimes, yeah, but he just gives you clarity and simplicity. It's like, these are things.
Right.
And when you hear it, you're like, well, yeah, if you're getting nothing out of therapy, of course that's bad. These are things you should ask yourself in therapy. Ask it to your therapist, and ask yourself, if your therapist feeds you something and says, wait, does this mean that you're actually angry at him when you're doing that, or are you actually sad when you're angry? And you're like, no, that's not true. Tell him no. It's not true. It doesn't resonate. He's not a prophet. I gave you a rule of thumb before that I have in every session. I will never give advice to a client, and the rule is that the client is the only expert in the room on himself.
That's very nice.
No one knows you better than you.
That's very well said.
In flag number 2, Rebbe said that if your therapist is feeding you something that doesn't feel right? A good therapist will tell you something, you're
right.
like, oh, yeah, that's it, right? The caveat Rebbe said was you could have a client who's in denial. If you're just in denial and you refuse to accept the fact that you have anger issues, then when your therapist tells you, like maybe not everyone has wronged you, maybe you did instigate, like, no, it's always everybody else, right? And it's not resonating with me. So that's not the therapist, that's you.
So to be honest, it's also a red flag. And what I mean by red flag is it's a red flag that this is not working. Yeah. He says, meaning we kind of have what we call in Gemara mhuncensored, that regardless whether you go right or left, you're messed over. Why? If it's the therapist putting ideas in your head, you're really bad. If the therapist is telling you stuff and you're in denial, you're also. So both ways there should be I don't know, what should the person do?
Well, ideally the therapist would pick up on that. Where he's like, I'm trying to tell you something which makes sense, which fits perfectly, and I do understand you, but you're not ready to hear what I'm saying. What's not letting you hear these words? Where's that wall, and why have you built it? Why can't you accept that?
Very nice.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Reb Shlomo. Honestly, I feel like I want to have a session with you right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, guys, you have to know that this couldn't have happened without Yehuda. And you asked Rebbe if we could do this, which I really think the only reason why a podcast like this hasn't happened yet was just because nobody asked.
Exactly. and we're looking forward to hopefully getting clips with longer questions. Some episodes we're going to be throwing in a few. If we get stuck at a certain point in the podcast, we're going to happily ask Rebbe that as well and throw that in.
Yeah, we can follow up. And if you guys have any questions that you would want to ask Rebbe, feel free to email us at mhuncensored, mental health uncensored, mhuncensored @gmail.com, mhuncensored@gmail.com.
It's going to be completely confidential, obviously. If you want to, make a new Gmail account.
Yeah, or email us for a friend.
Yeah, exactly. Just say it's for your friend, and we'll be like, oh, for sure. Absolutely. Anyways, have a fantastic week, everyone.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, and please share this with your friends, post it on your group chats, leave a 5-star rating, and subscribe. We feel very strongly that this is a message that Klal Yisrael should hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have a fantastic Shabbos.
Take care.